Well, hello again, everybody. It's Friday, and that means it's time for roll call. And to the regular audience, welcome back. Super fired up to be here with you again this Friday. And for the new audience, welcome. This is the forum where we dig deeper into the concepts and principles that our team introduced to you by way of our keynotes, breakout sessions, workshops, and the Top Gun Teamwork Program. And if you and I haven't yet met, my name is Robert Teschner. My flying call sign was Cujo. I'm the CEO, founder actually here at VMAX Group, and I'm fired up to be at least in your virtual midst today. And today we're going to have a conversation on the concept of subtracting before we add. And I will tell you, I attended a workshop session this week. Professor Bob Sutton from Stanford, author of a bunch of books to include the No Asshole Rule. He was talking about a book that influenced him called Subtract, and he summarized it for us. And he said, in a world where we're constantly adding, where we're always bringing new initiatives to the forefront, the concept of subtract is we need to remove before we add in order to be effective and not overwhelm, in order to make sure that things stick and they don't just go by the wayside, in order to ultimately lead effectively. And I must confess, I haven't yet read the book Subtract. I intend to, but I think I got the fundamental principles from Professor Sutton. And I will tell you that those principles actually coincide with something that we've been saying for a long time here at Team VMAX Group. And that is, number one, we don't believe in self-limiting beliefs. And number two, one of the biggest self-limiting beliefs we tell ourselves is we don't have enough time to debrief. In fact, we can extend that for those of you that have been exposed to the full team life cycle of planning, of communicating the plan by way of a pre-mission briefing, of executing the plan and then finishing execution by way of a debrief. The bigger self-limiting belief is we can't do any of that either because of how stinking busy we are. And I get it. I have zero doubt that all of us are busy. I know I'm busy, all right? I'm typically exhausted because of how busy I am. But I'll also confess to you that I do spend time on things that aren't value added for me, which wastes time that I could be using to do things that would be more valuable. And I suspect that all of us suffer the same afflictions. And in fact, I'll share with you a quick story of an organization that 100% for sure suffered that particular affliction and actually came to grips with that and did the right thing about it. So with this notion of subtraction being our center focus point for today, I'll take you back in time a few years. I was working with a company and I got a chance to work with their leadership team. Company said we're a very accountable organization. And when I asked the leaders how often you practice accountability, they said we do it monthly. And what they literally meant was once a month they met and they had their accountability session. And you can decide whether that's actually meeting the definition of a really accountable organization, but whatever, that for them this was sufficient. So I asked them, I said, when was your last one of these accountability sessions? And they said it was yesterday. So I'm meeting with this leadership team by way of Zoom. They share with me over the Zoom that they had this accountability session yesterday. I said, was it effective? And there was a long pause. So that was awkward right there for me. No, I didn't forget what I was about to say. I just want to give you insight into their response. There was total silence across the internet. Nothing was coming from them by way of Zoom. And I said, well, okay, let me ask you this. How much time did you spend on this accountability session yesterday? And somebody piped in, we spent about 6 hours on it, Cujo. I said, okay, so you spent 6 hours in this accountability session, but nobody can tell me, none of you leaders can tell me whether or not it was effective. And so that was kind of a jarring question. So one of the people said, all right, Cujo, I'll say it was effective. I said, okay, brilliant. You spent 6 hours on this thing, it was effective. Now explain to me, why do you say it was effective? And it was clear that the person who had answered the question, just to kind of keep the conversation moving probably, was a bit thrown for a loop here. And so the eyes went up into the upper corner of the screen, and the person said, well, Cujo, I guess because we started on time, we covered all the agenda items, and we ran about 45 minutes long. I said, okay, good, thank you. You had a 6-hour accountability session yesterday. It was effective. And the reason that it was effective is because you started on time, you covered all the agenda items regardless of consequence, and you ran long. That is our definition of success for this thing. That's how we know that we're being effective with accountability. And the leader came back and said, well, Kuja, that's why we don't like answering your questions, because you throw these answers back at us. I said, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for throwing the answer back at you. And we moved on. Good. So interesting exchange right there, right? And we're going back to a fundamental principle that we teach, and that is, in order to determine effectiveness, we need to know what we're measuring against from the very outset. And clearly, they had really never considered what is the definition of success of this 6-hour thing that we do once a month, 12 months a year. And then they did something what I would characterize as extraordinary. Okay, so the next day I get this unsolicited email from that team. And I probably had an email title, I don't remember, but the actual content of the email, no words. It was just screenshots. And I want to say that this meeting happened around the November-December timeframe. And the screenshots were of the following year's meeting calendar, okay? And apparently they had a very robust meeting agenda for the following year. And what I saw in those screenshots is they wiped out about 90% of their scheduled meetings. In other words, apparently after our conversation, they went back and assessed, like, what is the definition of success? Do we even have a point with the things that we're doing here? Is there any like deep purpose with all of these meetings, or are we just meeting for meeting's sake? And apparently they came to the conclusion that yes, they were actually wasting time. And so what did they do? They took bold action, and they subtracted. Good. And by subtracting, what did they do? They bought themselves the time to work on the things that matter. And that's exactly what it is that we need to be looking at right now. We need to be taking a look at, for those of us that are saying, yeah, this debrief thing, this is important, this is impactful, this is having teams that can learn on their own to do better in the future. That's worth doing. So how are we going to find the time to do it? Well, we're going to do what the author of Subtract suggested, what Professor Sutton was talking about. We're going to subtract from before we add so that we've got the capacity to do. And then to the question of how much time do we need to really buy back in order to be effective? And I'll tell you, and for anybody that's heard Team VMAX Group speak, we reference the work of Tannenbaum and Cerasoli constantly. And I'd say look them up, all right? If you look up their article from 2013, I mean, their meta-analysis, you can find it in Sage Journals. You can find it all over the internet. Tannenbaum, Cerasoli, 2013. One of the things that they highlight is that in their meta-analysis, their study of studies, effective debriefs that lead to a 20 to 25% performance boost last 18 minutes. That's their analysis. And while I would say that most debriefs, especially early on, are going to take much longer than that, all right, until we get into a rhythm of how do we do these things right. We learn, and the team becomes accustomed to doing the steps in the right way. It's going to take longer, but eventually we can get this thing really dialed in. And so we're not talking about a crazy amount of time that we need to buy back in order to build learning teams that learn on their own to do their work correctly. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And then you think about how effectiveness isn't just achieving mission success. It's how we achieve it that matters. And so often our teammates are stressed out because in order to be able to achieve mission success, they're working through the night prior to the thing being due, or the project coming to an end, or the meeting with the clients, or whatever it might be. And that's not the best way to win. So while you might say at the end of the day that you achieve mission success, how you achieved it truly matters. And never mind the fact that so much of our time is taken up doing rework, right? So much of our time is spent redoing the things that weren't done right the first time. I mean, anyway, you understand. You understand where the debrief really does fit in to every team construct for sure. And so let's pull from the book. Let's pull from Professor Sutton. Let's pull from what we've been saying here for years. Let's buy back the time to focus on the things that help us to be our best. And the debrief-focused approach is exactly that. Good. So we've got this weekend to think about it. We've got next week to start taking action on it. And we've got through the end of the year to position ourselves to have a better year next year. What a great time it is. And know that in the midst of all this greatness, our team is rooting for yours. We always are. We want you to continue to win moving forward. And I look forward to seeing you again here next Friday.